Hello, this is Clear Money Talk, where we turn complex financial concepts into clear, practical guidance. My name is Tim Clairmont.
And I'm Tyler Andrews. Welcome to the show. What should be on your New Year financial checklist? A New Year is the best time to revisit last year's goals, spending patterns, surprises. And Tim and I wanted to record a podcast for all of you with what we think are the best things to do first, second, third, fourth, and so on to set yourself up for the most amount of success in the new year.
Yeah,
Tim, you ready to jump in?
Yeah, that sounds great. I'm really excited to help people out. As we finish the year, I always look back on December 31st or January 1st and say, what do I remember? I wish I could remember every meal, every day, every conversation, every hug with every loved one. There's so many things I wish I could remember from the year, but it's not always the way it goes. So we remember what we remember. We want to make sure that you have some key actionable things that'll help you have better memories and ultimately really empower you in your journey to achieve your unique vision of happiness. That's what our mission's all about. So I know at the beginning of the year, one of the things I always do, Tyler, is I'll always go sit down, I'll put my AirPods in, and I'll take care of resolving the big fear that a lot of us come into the year with, which is what happens if something happens to me? A lot of people are dependent on me, whether it's my spouse or my children or other individuals that are dependent on me, my clients in this case in a very big way. I want to make sure that if something happens that's unexpected, either death or disability, that they're going to be okay. And I go sit down every year in January and pull out all my legal documents and say, if this is the year that bad stuff happens, is it going to go the way that I want it to go? And if the answer is yes, I don't worry about it for another year. I put it away and I know I'm good. And if the answer is no or I don't know, I give it to my attorney to fix. Then we fix the documents and then I put it away for another year and don't worry about it. A lot of times, the reason I'm sharing this story with you at the beginning isn't because this is all about estate planning or anything like that. It's about financial planning and the bigger picture. But we live oftentimes in this state of fear and uncertainty because we haven't answered those questions for ourselves. And once you answer those questions and you take some actionable steps forward, you can then be at peace and you can go ahead and move forward and know you have a plan. So let's see where you want to go.
Yeah, I love that, Tim. Thank you. I think a new year is the best time to look at last year's goals, last year's spending patterns, last year's surprises. And it's an opportunity to say, did my plan last year match reality, or is there something that needs a shift in the new year? So we have a checklist to talk through with all of you listeners today of the things that we find most important, at least for us, and a lot for our clients at the same time, of the things that are the easiest, lowest hanging fruit, if you will, to pick up and run with. Things that aren't going to be too difficult to tackle, but things that you can do immediately to help set your year up for success as much as possible. So, Tim, the first thing I wanted to talk about was updating your savings and retirement contributions. I think this is a big one, right? It's a brand new year. We have a whole new 12 months for IRA and Roth contributions, 401k, 403b, 457, 401a contributions. All of these letters and numbers that dictate what type of retirement plans we're saving into, and it's a new opportunity to try to max those out or try to put as much money that you're comfortable that fits within your plan into those accounts. So this is the time of the year where I always say, okay, this is what I'm trying to do this year as far as getting this much money into those accounts. What's my plan of attack and my strategy for making that happen? And also, the IRS continually moves the needle on these accounts for us. Last year, the contributions were X, and this year they might be Y. A lot of the times they adjust those for inflation, which presents a unique opportunity for all of us to put more money into those accounts if our circumstances allow for us to do so. So, Tim, thoughts?
Yeah, no, that's really spot on and on point. I think that there are a couple different people that we might be talking to right now. If you're already a good saver and you're maxing out your 401k, your Roth IRA, or your 403b account, or any of those other numbered accounts that Tyler just mentioned to you, which are just IRS tax codes, by the way, that represent what you're allowed to do. But the point is, if you're already maxing those, it's time to make a little tweak. Make sure you adjust them to hit the new levels, because there's going to be some new higher contribution amounts potentially in some of those accounts, and you want to make sure you're maxing them out this year. For those of you that are contributing at a lesser amount, or even maybe not contributing at all, it's a matter of you looking at yourself and saying, look, I want to save some money for my future self. I want to set aside money to make sure that my future self is going to have more money than I have today. And the only way to do that is to make that choice, that commitment, and start saving. Most of these contributions, Roth IRAs, 401ks, 403bs, if you get in a tight spot, you can always roll them back. You can decrease the contributions. You can even stop the contributions. They're not mandatory, they're voluntary. But just like a diet or an exercise regimen that we might tackle at the beginning of the year and do a good job. If you fall off the wagon, you just try to get back on the regimen again as soon as you can. It's the same way with saving. So make sure that you push yourselves a little bit. Look at whatever amount you're thinking you want to save and see if you can push that a little bit, because the more you save to catch up to where you want to get to, the happier your future self will be with your choices.
Yeah, that's totally true. Small increases now can make a huge impact by year end, and not even by year end, but over the course of your entire life. So your future self will always thank your current self for making those hard decisions now to benefit your future self, your future family, and everybody in between. So take a look at those savings and retirement contributions and make adjustments as needed for your circumstance. Number 2, Tim, which you already hit on, I appreciate you bringing it up, is reviewing beneficiaries and key legal documents. And I don't want to monopolize this topic. You already had mentioned it briefly earlier in the podcast. I think it's great for you to maybe expound a little bit more on that, because it is such an important, crucial thing to do. And like we said with the podcast, the beginning of the new year is it's kind of like spring cleaning, if you will. It's kind of like beginning of the new year financial checking stuff. And it's a great opportunity to use it for that benefit.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, and we talked about estate planning as far as your will, your advance directive, your durable power of attorney. Maybe you have a living trust. Maybe you have a special needs trust if you have a child who needs to be taken care of even in their adult life if something were to happen to you. All of these are possible scenarios. You may even have irrevocable trusts for estate planning purposes that can potentially reduce your estate tax burden, which also referred to as a death tax. A good thing to try to focus on legally minimizing where you can. That's the estate planning side of things, and reading those documents to make sure those are accurate and current is a good idea. And that's free. It doesn't cost you you don't have to pay your attorney, you don't have to pay anybody else to go sit down at a Starbucks or some other coffee joint or whatever your place of peace is, and stick in some AirPods or something that silences the noise around you, and then just read the documents yourself. That doesn't cost you anything other than your time. But once you read it, if you have any questions or clarifications or things that don't seem to fit right, it's a good idea to work with your professionals to fix those things. Now, we didn't talk about beneficiaries earlier, though, and Tyler just mentioned beneficiaries, so I don't want to neglect that particular issue. When you think about your accounts, a lot of times your accounts will actually have specific beneficiaries declared on the account. Your 401k, for example, you might have filled out a beneficiary declaration form when you opened that 401k. You would typically do that when you open a Roth IRA or any other kind of investment account. You might declare who your primary and contingent beneficiaries are. It's very important for you to understand, in the vast majority of circumstances, whatever you put on those beneficiary forms will trump or be more legally binding than whatever your will says. So you might think your will's great, this is exactly what I want. We've seen situations before where people have gone through a divorce. Their ex-spouse is still listed as their beneficiary on their old 401k plan. They never update it. They update their will. Now they say, hey, here's my new spouse, here's my kids and all this stuff they want to leave the money to, but they never changed the beneficiary on that 401k when they set it up, and they're with that company for a very long time, and then they pass away, and the net effect is that that entire 401k balance goes to the ex-spouse. That has happened multiple times. So make sure that your beneficiary is correct on the accounts themselves, in addition to making sure your legal documents are updated.
Yeah, no, thank you for hitting all that, Tim. Marriage, divorce, new children, loss of loved ones, all these events happen, unfortunately, and a lot of these changes go unreflected on people's financial plans all the time. So don't be one of those. If you need to make one of those tweaks, use this as an opportunity to look at those accounts, all those legal documents that you have, and just make sure it reflects your goals, your wishes, and your long-term financial plan. Ready for the next one, Tim?
Yeah, let's go. What you got?
Refresh your budget and your cash flow plan. So I like to do this. I like to look back at last year's spending to identify patterns, not problems. Don't need to look at last year's spending and be like, oh, I did a terrible job, I wanted to do X, Y, Z, but just look for patterns, because those patterns can help you identify the trajectory and actionable steps that you can take in this new year to set yourself up for success. And it's also a great opportunity to decide on key financial goals and priorities for this new year in 2026. Things like, are you trying to buy a house? Do you have a travel or vacations planned? Home renovations, paying down debts, just normal savings and retirement contributions like we mentioned earlier. All of these things need to oftentimes be budgeted for to make sure it fits within your cash flow, right? We only have so much coming in. We need to make sure that a certain amount goes out to pay things, and you need to make sure that your goals for this year align with your budgeting and your cash flow. So this is a great opportunity to look at those things for the whole new year, set a budget that's realistic, and try to do your best to stick to it throughout the course of the year. And that's something I sit down with myself at the beginning of every year, like Tim said with the estate planning that he does with himself. And I just find it extremely powerful and impactful for the next 12 months for myself.
That's great. And I want to give you some specific actionable suggestions as it
Please.
relates to that, because I do think that there are a variety of circumstances. You might be wondering, where do I start? How much should I be saving? How much should I be saving for short term? How much should I be saving for long term? How much should I be living on? All of those questions. Do I look at it as a percentage of my gross income or a percentage of my after-tax take-home income? These are all the kinds of questions that might hit you as a stumbling block when you start to do the exercise, and then you're like, I'm confused, I don't know what to do, and then you just walk away and you don't do anything. So we don't want that to happen to you. So let me give you a couple of suggestions. Now, if your income is, I would say, between 250,000 and lower, under 250,000 US dollars per year, and when I say income, I mean income tax reportable. So if you're single, that would be yourself. If you're married and a householding your income together, then your combined income, 250,000 or lower. Then my general advice to you is to live on, meaning by live on, I mean, this is what you do for your day-to-day expenses. This is what covers all of your money that you have to cover. Like, even if you have a bigger expense that comes up twice a year or once a year, think property taxes. Think if you pay those and they're not escrowed in your home. Think car insurance payment if you pay annually or if you pay semi-annually. Those things also need to be included in this core basic budget. 80%. 80% of your take home is a good number for you to live on. If you live on 100% or more, you're never going to save anything. You're not going to get anywhere. Then take the next 10% save for short-term emergency expenses, and then another 10% for long-term. At a minimum, you should be saving 10% for long-term to get you to where you want to go. Now, the younger you are when you start doing this, the better off you're going to be. This is the highest percentage that I would recommend you spend, 80% of your take-home pay. If you can afford to live on less, great. That will allow you to save even more. Save 20% long-term, save another 10% short-term, and maybe put aside another 10% for some vacations that you want to have a really good time with, and then you live on 60% of your income. Too many Americans today are spending 100% or more of their take-home pay, and I understand you're hearing this and saying, Tim, I can't live on 80%. I can't live on 60%. I need 100% to live. Look, I get it. It's not easy out there. Stuff's costing more. I totally respect that. I mean, inflation's real. Unfortunately, you have to put those self-imposed constraints. You could say the exact same thing. Tim, I just have to eat that extra piece of pizza. I say that all the time. Last night I got up after I had some pizza and I wanted to go have another piece, and my wife had already put them in the fridge for the next day, and I was like, I know I don't really need it. Okay, so I didn't eat it. It was a good win. That's not always the case. You don't always win. Sometimes you eat the extra piece of pizza. So the same point here is like, look, maybe you're going to creep above the 80% on a paycheck. Stuff's going to pop up, but you got to keep that good habit in place. And if you can just live on at least 80%, figure out a way to do that. If you feel like you can't afford that, you cut back lifestyle or increase your income. Those are your two choices. Make more, spend less. That's the only option to get there.
Yeah. No, I think all those are the things that we all know, right? But sometimes the most simple things are the hardest to actually do. Sometimes a layup in basketball is the hardest shot to make for whatever reason. I also heard a really good quote recently I'd love to share.
Yeah,
okay with
which
and it goes exactly with what you were just saying, Tim, is that it ties with in spending less than what you're earning. And it's if you stay small enough for long enough, you'll be big enough soon enough. And all that means is if you live below your means or you live below your income and you're diligent with saving and investing and trying to preserve and improve your future financial situation, it will happen sooner than you think. But it does take some sacrifices and some short-term gratification delaying in order to get there. So, Tim, thank you for
well said. It's a good
mentioning
quote.
all that.
Yeah.
It's a great quote.
Yeah, it's good. All right, we've hammered enough on that one, but if you've never even put your brain on it, put your brain on it. It's a good idea. Just look at what you're spending, look at what you're earning, and just be aware. I think Tyler started this whole segment with it's not about beating yourself up. We're not trying to beat you up. I'm trying to give you some actionable tools that will help you improve what you want to have happen in your life. And that doesn't start with making yourself feel bad. It starts with looking at realistically the reality. What have you spent? What are you making? Let's figure out how to get that in line.
Yep. Ready for the next one?
Yeah, let's do it. What you got?
reevaluate and review your protection plan. I'm talking about insurance here, everybody. Okay, so life insurance, long-term care insurance, disability insurance, homeowners insurance, auto insurance, all of these different types of protection policies, as we often refer to them. It's insurance at the end of the day, things that protect you in the case of an unforeseen circumstance that might present itself. And insurance needs change with income, marriage, family dynamics, inflation. All these different things are prime opportunities to say, is my protection plan still adequate to protect me if anything were to happen? And all of these are key categories to review, sit down at the beginning of the year and say, is this enough coverage if this thing were to happen to me this year? Is my family going to be okay if this happens to me this year? And sometimes those are more difficult things to actually pinpoint and decide yourself. So maybe it means sitting down with your property and casualty agent or your life insurance agent or your financial advisor and sitting down with them and saying, hey, I had this coverage. My situation has changed since I originally got this coverage. Are there any changes that I should be making this year to make sure I am adequately protected if any of those unforeseen circumstances should happen? So insurance review is a great opportunity for that this time of the year. Tim, I know that you are dying to share your insights on this, and I would love for you to do that.
Yeah.
But insurance review.
Yeah, sure. No, happy to hit this one. The one that comes to my mind, one of the biggest causes of bankruptcy in the United States is lack of adequate or any health insurance. And so I know we don't work with health insurance here at Clear Financial Partners, not at this time at least, but most of our clients have health insurance through their group employer. Now, if you're self-employed, you've got to make sure you got some kind of health insurance taken care of. And once you retire, especially if you retire under 65, you're likely to purchase health insurance to subsidize, whatever kind of gap you have till you hit Medicare. And then even at Medicare age at 65, that is not usually as strong of a policy as what you have through your employer. So a lot of times people will acquire something called Medigap insurance, which is an additional insurance policy to add on top of the existing Medicare benefits that'll ultimately get something more similar to what you've been accustomed to with your previous group employment if you might have had that kind of health insurance situation. My bottom line on this is if you don't have health insurance, that's where you start. Get health insurance, because if you're living without health insurance, it's a huge risk. Now, if you've got health insurance, it's probably already behind you. That's great. Perfect. Check the box, move on. Hopefully you have a good policy. Then we're looking at like auto and home insurance. Again, not something we do here at Clear Financial Partners, but you want to make sure you're adequately protected. One of the ways to make sure you're adequately protected is to seriously look at an umbrella policy. Look at getting an umbrella policy that's equal to your net worth. Now, they often start at $1 million as far as the protection is concerned, but what that does is if you have a big mistake that happens in your auto situation or your home situation, house burns down, get in a big car wreck, it's like an extra $1 million piggy bank that if you hit your limits on your auto and home policies, you can go into that $1 million and use that to help you deal with that issue so you don't have to dig into your retirement savings and all the other money you've set aside. So if you don't have an umbrella policy, call your agent and look into seeing about getting one. They're not very expensive. I mean, a few $100s a year, generally speaking, for that first $1 million. But that's a good other thing to keep in mind. Now, as we move past auto and home insurance, we move past health insurance, we get to stuff we do handle, which is life insurance, long-term care insurance, long-term disability insurance. And many times these get neglected. If you're self-employed, make sure you have long-term disability insurance. If you have long-term disability insurance available through a group employer, make sure you're taking advantage of it. Just double check and make sure you've got that. Usually it'll cover about 60 to 70% of your income. So if you were going to get disabled and you can't do your job anymore because you got disabled, it would pay you 60 to 70% of what you were previously earning. And that's typically the kind of coverage you want to have. Now, there's a waiting period. You usually have to be disabled for a few months before they're going to start paying that. But once you hit that waiting period and then they start paying it, imagine if you had a machine that printed money in your basement, and every single week or every 2 weeks or once a month, it would print the same amount of money. That's what you are for your family. That's what your paychecks represent. How much would you pay to insure that machine, to make sure that machine, if it broke down, you were still going to get those checks, that cash? I would insure the crud out of that machine. That's what you have. And that's what long-term disability insurance can do. It can make sure that somebody else is replacing those regular checks. On the other hand, if you're to die, nobody's there. The machine's gone. It's been pulled out of your basement and trashed and thrown away. Who's going to take care of your family now? That's not disability insurance. That's where life insurance comes in. And life insurance can be so inexpensive. There's really no good excuse. If you're healthy and you've got people that are dependent on you and you love anybody in this world, those are the people that you want to make sure are okay if something happens to you. And you can get some very inexpensive life insurance to take care of those short-term needs. There are other ways you can use life insurance to do some cooler stuff as well if you want to leverage that life insurance strategy into something bigger for yourself for saving. If you're dealing with long-term care at 50 years old or above, you really want to give some serious consideration to that cost and whether or not you want to self-insure or use insurance to take care of it. A lot on insurance, as you said, Tyler. I wanted to give you some actionable insights, a little bit of a snapshot, if you will, an appetizer, buffet of everything that's going on there from an insurance standpoint. If you want to dive deeper into any of those, there are plenty of resources available online. And of course, if it's something that we do, we're happy to assist.
Yep, that sounds great. Okay, check your taxes before tax season checks you. What do I mean by that, Tim? Okay, it's a brand new year. Are your withholdings accurate on, from a W-4 perspective from your employer to cover yourself throughout the entirety of the year? If you're self-employed, do you have a strategy set up for maybe estimated tax withholdings and payments to the IRS and the Department of Revenue where you live? All of these things, you have an entire runway of the year now to align your tax situation, which we don't give tax advice, disclosure, but to make sure that you have the entire 12 months to align your tax situation that best benefits you for the year. Making these changes at the end of the year in the fourth quarter, as an example, are much more difficult, and you have a much shorter runway to make any of those changes. So being that it's January, take a look at your tax situation. If there's any changes that need to be made from withholdings or anything else, now's a great time to do it. It's also a great opportunity to look at the rest of the year and say, maybe what Roth opportunities do I have for conversions or otherwise? Charitable giving. Are there any charitable giving endeavors that you participate in and that you're passionate about and that you want to integrate into your grander plan? Is there bracket planning, making sure that you're maximizing all those lower tax brackets and strategizing your income and where it's going to come from if you're in retirement, as an example, to make sure that you're optimizing tax planning throughout the entirety of the year. These are all things that you want to check before taxes check you. And you're in the driver's seat right now. It's up to you to make those changes and look at your plan, and this is the best opportunity in the entire year to do so. Tim, I know you're itching to talk about taxes as well. This is your one of your favorite topics. What are your thoughts?
So, only because of the length of our podcast so far, I want to be respectful of your time. We have done full-blown tax podcasts, and I'm sure you will see those in the future from us, where we can dive a lot deeper into that. I think that right now I want to come back and just take a step back and say, look, there was a quote that I heard, and I'm not going to be able to quote it verbatim. I'm sure you can look it up on the internet or on your phone real quick or whatever, but I can tell you who said it. It was because it's the coolest name. His name is Judge Learned Hand, Learned, Learned Hand. Like, that's just a cool name. Anyway, he said that it is every taxpayer's right in the United States to legally minimize your taxes wherever possible and change your life basically accordingly to minimize your taxes. We're not talking about not paying your fair share. People are overpaying their fair share all the time because they're not looking at their plan and the way they're structuring their life. If you plan and structure your life in a way where it's more aligned with the tax code, the way that it's situated, you'll be paying your fair share, and you'll find that your fair share may be less than what you've been paying in the past. That difference is money you can then turn around and invest and save for yourselves, whether it's for the later bucket, for a later time frame, or the short-term situation, or maybe, imagine if you were living on 90% of your take-home, and we found 10% of your tax savings of your income in tax savings. Now you could live on 80% and save that extra 10%, and it won't even feel like you're changing your lifestyle. That's a very real possibility. And I know I didn't mention earlier, if you were making over $250,000 a year as a household, I would recommend 80% is probably too high. You should be living on more like 60% of your take-home pay, or 50% even of your take-home pay, and saving the rest so that you can build the kind of wealth that's necessary to replace the income that you've grown accustomed to when you want to retire or reach financial independence. If you find that you're already way ahead of schedule, you can afford to spend more of your take-home pay, but that requires you to do a little bit of analysis.
Yep. Well said. Okay, we got one more. I know we're trying to keep the podcast tight. It's probably going to be a little bit a longer one than normal people. So just stay buckled up. We're going to get you there, I promise. Last one, Tim, is rebalance your investments for the new year, right?
Yeah.
So markets shift, so does your allocation. So rebalancing will help realign your portfolio with your risk tolerance, your time horizon, your financial goals as markets are constantly changing. So this is a great opportunity to rebalance things for the start of the new year, get it off to a good start. It doesn't mean that you don't rebalance throughout the remainder of the year, though. There's some great opportunities, especially as you get towards the end of the year and you have more insights into what your tax situation looks like, to do some tax deduction creation, as we talk about tax loss harvesting, more commonly referred to. But rebalancing your portfolio at the beginning of the year, there's no reason why you shouldn't give that to consideration, depending on your situation and what makes the most sense for you.
Yeah, no, you said it, Tyler. The only thing I would add is the analogy that I use with a lot of my clients to make it easier to understand. So imagine that you're in just two funds. I'm not recommending you be in two funds, but imagine they're 50-50. The very next day, after you allocate half of your portfolio in one and half in the other, one of those funds is going to grow faster than the other. It's just the nature of how things shift. And so as soon as one of them grows faster, that's now 52% and the other one's 48%. That's what we're talking about when we're saying rebalancing. We're saying, hey, it might be that this last year some of your stuff grew faster and is now a bigger percentage, a bigger piece of the pie than you intended it to be. And so realigning your portfolio with your intentions is what we refer to as rebalancing. And it's kind of like aligning the tires on your car, just something you need to do periodically as they start to get a little wonky. And if you haven't done that in the last year or more, you probably need to take a hard look at that.
Yeah, well said. Cool. Nice.
We still got to do a just the answer.
We'll do the just the answer. I think we'll kind of bring it to somewhat of a close, and that the new year brings new goals, new financial opportunities, and new opportunities to course correct, if you will. And your financial checklist isn't about perfection, but it's about progress and about clarity and about continuing to move things forward for you and your whatever your plan looks like. So that's why we wanted to record this for you. Hopefully, there's some good actionable takeaways from it. And with that, we'll dive into just the answer.
Yeah, let's try to do this just the answer. There's so much here. Bottom line, just the answer. Actionable ideas that we're trying to make a difference for you when you tackle this new year. You're going into 2026. How do we make this 2026 better for you financially? We went through a list of several bullets. I'm going to have Tyler recap each of those bullets briefly, and
I'd
then
love to.
We can hit it. What was the first suggestion?
First suggestion we had was updating your savings and your retirement contributions.
Good. Let's go back and forth each one. So updating your savings and retirement. You take that one, Tyler.
Yep. So we talked about new contribution limits potentially might present themselves for all the different retirement savings vehicles, as well as other vehicles you might be leading into for your short-term and long-term financial future. So reevaluate what your savings goals looks like for now and for later in your life, and if any changes are necessary, just make sure that you get those implemented at the beginning of the year, so that way you have the entire runway of the year to have those benefit you in that capacity.
Yeah, and you have more room as they keep creating more room. So take advantage of that.
Yep.
Number two.
Next thing we talked about was review beneficiaries and key legal documents.
Right, and I recapped earlier in this. I opened the presentation, or as far as this podcast, with that concept. Every year, it's a good idea to take a look at your legal documents. Just sit down and say, "This is the year I pass away. If this is the year something bad happens to me, is this the way I want it to go?" That's free. Just takes you the time to look at your own documents. And if you don't have the documents, probably a good idea to get that taken care of. If you need some help with that, you should reach out to us, because that is something we can assist you with as well. We don't provide legal advice, but we can assist you with helping you get those legal documents created. As far as beneficiaries, the other element there that was touched on is make sure your beneficiaries are accurate. Oftentimes your beneficiaries will supersede your legal documents. So if your beneficiaries are inaccurate, that can totally mess up your plan.
That's right. Next thing was refresh your budget and your cash flow plan. So look at last year's spending to identify patterns, not problems, and then decide on key financial priorities for the new year in 2026. What are those big spending things that you need to save and invest for? Buying a house, renovations, paying down debts, funding education. All these are different examples of things that you might want to be planning and budgeting for accordingly to make sure that you can make ends meet to make that goal possible for yourself.
Mm-hmm. And we give some very specific metrics in that in the longer version of the podcast. So if you're just listening to just the answer, I highly recommend you listen to the full version.
Yep. Next was reevaluate your protection plan. This is your insurance review.
Right. So with the protections, we talked about several different insurance elements you want to take a peek at. Health insurance, auto and home insurance, life insurance, long-term care insurance, long-term disability insurance. Those are the main types that we referred to. We expanded on all of those in a little bit deeper capacity than what I'm sharing with you right now. If you haven't heard of any of those, it's probably a good idea for you to look into it. And if you don't have health insurance, get it, because that's one of the biggest reasons why people end up going bankrupt in the United States.
Yep. Next one, check your taxes before tax season checks you. Okay, so it's January. Now's the time to look at withholdings, make sure that those are appropriate. If you're a W-2 employee, if you're self-employed, make sure that you have a plan for paying your taxes that you are owed from your self-employment activities, so that way you don't run into penalties or late filings or anything like that. Now's a great opportunity to do that. And then also look at it for other opportunities that might be beneficial for you and your situation for the course of this year. I'm talking about charitable giving, Roth opportunities, whether those are conversions or contributions, as well as bracket planning. We talked about, Tim and I, making sure that any low-hanging brackets as far as tax rates are concerned, that you're taking advantage of those, if that's something that makes sense for you. And just make sure that you check your taxes. That's the gist of it.
Yep. Bottom line is most people are overpaying on their taxes, so you can legally minimize them, and if you can cut those taxes a little bit, that extra money can just go towards accomplishing other things that you'd like to accomplish with it.
Yep. Last thing, Tim, take this home for us, rebalancing your investments for the new year.
Yes, and rebalancing your investment for the new year, and recap on that. The concept here, things over time change in your portfolio, and your intentions when you created the portfolio are not likely reflected in that portfolio within just a few days. So as more time goes by, and some of those pieces of your portfolio might grow faster than others, you end up out of whack. And it's time to realign the tires on your car, realign your portfolio by doing a rebalance of your portfolio to the allocation mix you want. That kind of allocation mix, by the way, could be stocks, bonds, could be international, domestic, it could be emerging markets and developed countries internationally, or it could be large, medium, and small companies in the U.S. with growth or value. All of those elements you should give consideration to when you do rebalance.
Thank you, Tim.
Mm-hmm.
Bonus segment.
Ooh, bonus segment. Woohoo!
So Tim and I, we know this is a lot to think about. So what we wanted to do for all the listeners is we created a free New Year financial checklist that's kind of a guide to help you through all the stuff we talked about today. You can download it using the link in the description of the podcast below from wherever you're listening. It'll be available for you there. I highly encourage you to take a look at that checklist. It can be a nice piece of paper that you can put pen to check things off as you go to accomplish all the things we talked about in this podcast today.
Yeah, we want to give you something that's actionable to make it even easier for you to do what you're trying to do. Good on you for listening to this. It's not easy to just take that first step of listening. It's often not that easy to take the next step of actually implementing, but you've started the momentum already, so you might as well keep the momentum going. You're only going to thank yourself for it later.
That's right. Okay, and as we do, Tim, we're going to end with trivia.
Yay!
And
what you got?
We'll have some fun with this. Okay,
Okay.
Tim, I would like you to tell me, in what year did the tradition of dropping the New Year's Eve ball in Times Square first begin? I do have multiple choice for you. Let me know if you'd like that.
You always hit me with these obscure ones. This is a tough one. Clearly it's been a long time, what do you got? I'm going to need the multiple choice.
Here are your options.
Okay.
1907.
Okay.
1920.
Okay.
1935.
Okay.
1951.
Whew.
I'm laughing because those are really bunched up. It's not like 2008. And,
I'm sure it wasn't that. I mean, I
1850.
saw the ball drop myself in the last 25 years, so sure. I was pretty sure it wasn't. It wasn't in the last half of my lifetime thus far.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with 1920. That just feels right to me. I mean, it could have been earlier, it could have been later. The Great Depression obviously happens later, 1929. But the Roaring '20s and all that stuff, I'm just going to guess that.
It's a great guess.
Totally
not the right answer.
Okay. What was the right answer?
It's 1907.
1907.
That
Wow.
Seems like a really long time ago.
118 years of history of tradition of doing that.
Yeah. So the first ball drop was in 1907. It marked a new tradition. Just like a new year marks a fresh start for your financial checklist.
Oh.
Tying those things together. So I know that Tim and I both just wanted to say thank you for tuning in to another episode of Clear Money Talk. We definitely appreciate the time you spent with us today.
And that'll bring us to a close. Thank you so much. Oh, yeah, we have this wonderful ending. Of course, if you'd like to learn more or schedule a no-cost, no-obligation clarity call, you can visit us at clearfp.com. And we hope today's conversation has been bringing more clarity to your financial world.
Yeah, and If you found value in the episode, please consider sharing it with a loved one, a friend, a family, a neighbor, and consider subscribing so that way you don't miss any future episodes.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. Until next time.
See ya.
Tim Clairmont and Tyler Andrews are investment advisor representatives offering securities and advisory services through Cetera Wealth Services, LLC, member FINRA SIPC. Advisory services offered through Cetera Investment Advisors, LLC, a registered investment advisor. Cetera is under separate ownership from any other named entity. The views depicted in this material are for information purposes only and are not necessarily those of Cetera Wealth Services, LLC. They should not be considered specific advice or recommendations for any individual. Cetera Wealth Services, LLC exclusively provides investment products and services through its representatives. Although Cetera does not provide tax or legal advice or supervise tax, accounting, or legal services, Cetera representatives may offer these services through their independent, outside business. This information is not intended as tax or legal advice. All investing involves risk, including the possible loss of principal. There is no assurance that any investment strategy will be successful. Examples referenced are hypothetical only and do not represent the actual performance of any particular investments. Converting from a traditional IRA to a Roth IRA is a taxable event. A Roth IRA offers tax-free withdrawals on taxable contributions. To qualify for the tax-free and penalty-free withdrawal or earnings, a Roth IRA must be in place for at least 5 tax years, and the distribution must take place after age 59 and a half, or due to death, disability, or a first-time home purchase, up to a $10,000 lifetime maximum. Depending on state law, Roth IRA distributions may be subject to state taxes. Distributions from traditional IRAs and employer-sponsored retirement plans are taxed as ordinary income and, if taken prior to reaching age 59 and a half, may be subject to an additional 10% IRS tax penalty. Investors should consider the investment objectives, risks and charges, and expenses of mutual funds and ETFs carefully before investing. The prospectus, which contains this and other information about the funds and ETFs, can be obtained directly from the company or from your financial professional. The prospectus should be read carefully before investing or sending money. A diversified portfolio does not assure a profit or protect against loss in a declining market. Dollar cost averaging will not guarantee a profit or protect you from loss, but may reduce your average cost per share in a fluctuating market. Investors cannot invest directly in indexes. The performance of any index is not indicative of the performance of any investment and does not take into account the effects of inflation and the fees and expenses associated with investing. Although it is possible to have guaranteed income for life with a fixed annuity, there is no assurance that this income will keep up with inflation. There is a surrender charge imposed generally during the first 5 to 7 years or during the rate guarantee period. There is a surrender charge imposed generally during the first 5 to 7 years that you own the contract. Withdrawals prior to age 59 and a half may result in a 10% IRS tax penalty in addition to any ordinary income tax. The guarantee of the annuity is backed by the financial strength of the underlying insurance company. Investment subaccount values will fluctuate with changes in market conditions. An investment in a variable annuity involves investment risk, including possible loss of principal. Variable annuities are designed for long-term investing. The contract, when redeemed, may be worth more or less than the total amount invested. Variable annuities are subject to insurance-related charges, including mortality and expense charges, administrative fees, and the expenses associated with the underlying subaccounts. Investors should consider the investment objectives, risks, and charges and expenses of the variable annuity carefully before investing. The prospectus contains this and other information about the variable annuity. Contact Clear Financial Partners at info@clearfp.com or 503-579-1000 to obtain a prospectus, which should be read carefully before investing or sending money. The cost and availability of life insurance depend on factors such as age, health, and the type and amount of insurance purchased. Before implementing a strategy involving life insurance, it would be prudent to make sure that you are insurable by having the policy approved. As with most financial decisions, there are expenses associated with the purchase of life insurance. Policies commonly have mortality and expense charges. In addition, if a policy is surrendered prematurely, there may be surrender charges and income tax implications. The target date of a target date fund may be a useful starting point in selecting a fund, but investors should not rely solely on the date when choosing a fund or deciding to remain invested in one. Investors should consider funds asset allocation over the whole life of the fund. Often target date funds invest in other mutual funds, and fees may be charged by both the target date fund and the underlying mutual funds. The principal value of these funds is not guaranteed at any time, including at the target date. Cetera does not offer any direct investments, endorsements, or advice as it relates to Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency. This is for informational purposes only. Bank certificate of deposits are insured by an agency of the federal government and offer a fixed rate of return, whereas both the principal and yield of investment securities will fluctuate with changes in market conditions. Clear Financial Partners is located at 15573 Bangui Road, Suite 100, Lake Oswego, Oregon 97035. For more information, please call us at 503-579-1000.